My wife made me sign a prenup because her millionaire parents despised me. 8 years later, I'm 5 times richer than them. Now, they're begging to remove it. But I paid them $60K back and exposed them. I'm 37 years old. I own an electronics company that's making more than I ever imagined. And I need to tell this story because what happened with my in-laws a few weeks ago still has me wondering if I was too harsh or if I finally did the right thing. The thing is, these last 8 years have been an absolute roller coaster, and it all started when I met Stephanie at a sales conference when I was like 27 years old, working for a medical equipment company and basically spending my life on the road trying to close deals. She was there representing her family's company, a pretty successful real estate firm, and I was completely head over heels from the first moment. You know, those things that happen to you and you think only happen in movies, but they happen to you. We dated for almost 2 years before I decided to quit my job and start my own electronics components business. Sounds glamorous, but the truth is it was months of basically living off Stephanie's savings while I put everything together from scratch in the garage of our rented apartment. She worked full-time at the family business and would come home to find me surrounded by cables, circuits, and inventory boxes. And never, not once, did she make me feel bad about being in that situation. I think that's what made me fall more in love with her, that she really believed in what I was doing when nobody else did. Like, not even myself some days, if I'm being honest. When I turned 29, I proposed to her. Nothing extravagant. I took her to the same place where we had our first date and asked if she wanted to marry me. She said yes through tears, and I thought that was going to be the hardest part of planning a wedding, but oh man, was I wrong. We started organizing everything to get married in less than a year because we both wanted to start our life together right away, you know what I mean? We'd already been together for almost 3 years. We lived together, so why wait any longer? Everything was going well until her parents, Lawrence and Deborah, asked us to come to their house for dinner like 2 months before the wedding. I need to backtrack a bit to explain who my in-laws are. Lawrence and Deborah own this real estate firm that's been operating in the city for like 30 years, and let's just say they've done very well, like very well. They have this huge house in an exclusive area, they drive luxury cars, and from day one they made it very clear that I wasn't up to their standards. They never said it directly, but you felt it in every interaction, in every passive-aggressive comment about my work, my family, my lack of a college degree. My parents, Jeffrey and Sharon, are incredible people but middle class. I mean, my dad was a high school football coach for 30 years, and my mom managed a local coffee shop. And for Stephanie's parents, that was basically being nobody. They never bothered to really get to know them. And when we went to family gatherings, there was always this horrible tension where I felt like I had to constantly prove something. So that dinner, we arrived thinking it was going to be about the final wedding details, but no, it turned out to be a complete ambush. We sat down in their formal dining room, the one where they have the expensive china that probably costs more than my first car, and Lawrence pulled out a folder and put it on the table. Stephanie looked at me confused, and her dad said something like, "We've prepared a prenuptial agreement that we need you to sign before the wedding." I froze, because, seriously? 2 months before we're getting married, they come at me with this? Lawrence started explaining that it was to protect Stephanie, that since she came from a family with resources and I was starting a business that might or might not work, it was important to establish that assets would remain separate. But then came the part that really hurt, because Deborah added that it also included a clause where I would have to pay back any financial support I'd received from Stephanie if we ever got divorced. I mean, basically they were telling me they assumed I was a gold digger, that I was going to fail, and that they needed to protect their daughter from me. I felt humiliated, completely humiliated, sitting there while these two looked at me like I was trash. Stephanie was red with embarrassment and anger. I could see her trying to hold back from exploding right there. She told her dad this was an insult, that she had chosen to support me because she wanted to, because she believed in us, and that she didn't need them to protect her from her own husband. But Lawrence was firm. He said either we signed the prenup or there would be no wedding, simple as that. I remember Deborah added something like, "If you really love her, you shouldn't have a problem signing this. It's just a piece of paper." And I was thinking, yeah, sure. It's just a piece of paper that says you think I'm shit. Stephanie and I left without signing anything. We spent the next few weeks fighting about what to do. She wanted to cancel the wedding or get married without her parents' support, but I knew that would destroy her. She loved her parents despite everything, and I didn't want to be the reason their relationship was destroyed. So I made a decision. I told her we would sign the damn prenup. She didn't want to, but I insisted. I told her, look, someday this won't matter. Someday my business is going to work, and we're going to prove them wrong. I don't know if I really believed it at that moment, or if I was just trying to convince myself, but we signed. We both signed that paper that basically said I was worth nothing and would never be worth anything. The wedding was nice, I guess. Although every time I saw Lawrence and Deborah during the ceremony, I felt this knot in my stomach. My business kept going. Slowly at first, but it started to grow. The first year was brutal. I worked like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and Stephanie continued being my rock, my total support. We had Joshua when I was 31. And that motivated me even more, because now I had a bigger reason to make everything work. The following years were of steady growth, nothing spectacular but solid. And by the time we'd been married 5 years, my company was already generating decent profits. I'd paid off all my initial debts, and we were starting to live comfortably. But the last 2 years, I mean literally the last 2 years, things exploded in a way nobody expected. I got a contract with an international distributor, then another, and suddenly my electronics components company was billing figures I never imagined. I hired more staff, opened a second location, and basically went from being the failed son-in-law to being significantly richer than my in-laws. And when I say significantly, I'm talking about like 5 times richer than them. Maybe more. I bought a new house, upgraded everything, and life was being really good. Like a month ago, Lawrence and Deborah showed up at our house unannounced on a Sunday afternoon. Joshua was excited to see his grandparents because despite everything, he loves them, and they've been good to him. I have to admit that. Stephanie made coffee and we thought it was a normal visit. But after Joshua went to play in his room, Lawrence said they needed to talk to us about something important. I already had a bad feeling, but I didn't imagine what was coming. Lawrence said, with all the seriousness in the world, that they'd been thinking and believed it was time to dissolve the prenuptial agreement. That now that my business had been so successful, it no longer made sense to maintain that separation of assets, that we were family and should act as such. I laughed. I literally laughed in his face because I couldn't believe the audacity. I said something like, "Oh, so now that I have money, suddenly I'm good enough for the family, is that it?" Deborah tried to say they had always accepted me, that the prenup was just a normal precaution, and I interrupted her and reminded her exactly what they said that night 8 years ago, basically word for word. I told them the prenup stays exactly as it is, that they were the ones who insisted on protecting Stephanie from me, and now I insist on protecting myself from any attempt to benefit from my success. Lawrence turned red. The guy literally turned like a tomato and started saying that he and Deborah had supported me, that without Stephanie's help, I never would have gotten to where I am. I told him he was right, that Stephanie had been my salvation, but that the two of them had done nothing but humiliate me and doubt me from day one, and that now they wanted a slice of the cake they helped bake, but only after seeing it came out perfect. The argument got ugly, very ugly. Deborah started crying, saying we were ungrateful, that they had included Stephanie in the family will and all that, and I told her I didn't care about their money, that I never had, that all I wanted was respect, and they never gave it to me. Lawrence stood up and told Stephanie she had to choose, that either she put her family in their place or they would leave and not come back. Stephanie was quiet, processing everything, and I could see she was devastated because she loves her parents, but she also loves me. They left that night without resolving anything, and during the following weeks, they started bombarding Stephanie with messages. That I was manipulating her, that her son deserved to have grandparents in his life, that I was vindictive and cruel, basically trying to turn her against me. Stephanie showed me the messages, and I saw how each one hurt her, and at that moment I made another decision. I went to my accountant and asked him to calculate exactly how much money I'd received from Stephanie during those first years of my business, every cent. It added up to like $40,000 total, considering rent, food, basic expenses. She covered while I was starting up. I prepared a check for $60,000, adding generous interest, and took it personally to Lawrence and Deborah. I knocked on their door, and when Lawrence opened, I extended the check. I told him that according to the prenup they insisted I sign, I had the obligation to return any support received in case of separation, and that although we weren't getting divorced, I wanted to eliminate that debt so they could never again say they owed me anything, or that I had depended on them. That, with that payment, our relationship was settled, and to please stop harassing my wife. Lawrence looked at the check, tore it up in my face, and told me this was never about money, that it was about respect and family, and that I clearly didn't understand either. He closed the door, and I stood there with the pieces of the check on the ground, thinking these guys are completely crazy. Things escalated badly after that. One afternoon, like 2 weeks later, they showed up again, at my house, this time earlier when Joshua had just gotten home from school. They didn't knock, just opened the door because Stephanie had given them a key years ago and came in demanding to speak with their daughter. Joshua ran to hug them, excited, and I had to control myself not to explode at them, right there in front of my son. I told them to leave, that they weren't welcome. But Lawrence completely ignored my words and called for Stephanie. Stephanie came down from the office where she was working, and when she saw her parents there, her expression was one of total exhaustion. She asked them what they were doing, why they couldn't respect our boundaries. And Deborah started with her speech about how they were her parents, that they had a right to see their grandson, that they couldn't allow me to separate them from their family. Stephanie took a deep breath and told them something I'll never forget. She told them that she had chosen to marry me, knowing they didn't accept me, that she had worked to support me because she believed in us, and that if they had had even a little faith in her judgment or in my ability, none of this would be happening. That the prenup was a humiliation she accepted to keep the peace. But now that I had proven to be successful, they couldn't just show up demanding the rules change. Lawrence tried to interrupt her, but Stephanie raised her hand and told him to shut up, that for once in his life he should listen to her. She told him that Tyler, that's me, was her husband, the father of her son, her partner in everything, and that she chose that life. That if they wanted to be part of that life, they had to earn her husband's respect, not the other way around. That they couldn't keep treating me like I was less than them just because I came from a different family or because I didn't start with money. Deborah said something about how they had raised her, about family values and loyalty, and Stephanie cut her off and told her she had her own family now, that it was Joshua, Tyler, and her, and that was her priority. She told them they had to leave, and that until they could respect her husband and her marriage, they weren't welcome in our home. Lawrence tried to play the grandson card, saying Joshua needed them, and Stephanie told him Joshua was perfectly fine, that he had 2 parents who loved him and a stable life, and that grandparents who didn't respect his parents weren't the kind of influence she wanted in her son's life. She walked them to the door, literally threw them out, and when they closed, she told them through the door to let her know when they were ready for a respectful adult conversation, but until then, not to come back. That night, Stephanie cried for hours. I held her while she processed everything. Because as difficult as her parents were, they were still her parents. And breaking that relationship wasn't easy for her. But at the same time, I felt like finally someone had completely defended me, that she had chosen our marriage over her parents' expectations. Joshua asked us what was happening with Grandma and Grandpa, and we explained, in terms a 6-year-old can understand, that sometimes adults have disagreements and need time apart to think things through. We blocked Lawrence and Deborah everywhere, phones, social media, everything. We changed the locks on the house because technically they still had a key. Stephanie talked to her brother, who lives in another state, and explained the situation. He was understanding. Said he'd always seen how they treated me, and that he understood our position. It's been like 3 weeks since then, and we haven't heard anything from them. I don't know if they're waiting for us to give in, or if they really got the message. Joshua asked about his grandparents a few days ago. I told him Grandma and Grandpa were busy, but we'd see them soon, although honestly, I don't know if that's true. Stephanie says eventually her parents will have to swallow their pride, if they want to be part of Joshua's life. But that depends entirely on them. I'm not going to give in. I already gave in once 8 years ago when I signed that prenup, and I promised myself never again to let them make me feel less. My company keeps growing. My family is doing well, and if Lawrence and Deborah can't accept that I earned my place in this family, with work and dedication, then I guess that's their loss, not mine.